Hey there, friends. David Lightbringer here to apologize for lying to you at the end of the last video. That's right, I said there'd only be one more Melisandre's Secrets video, but I kept writing, and now you have two more videos to look forward to. That's actually not too bad, is it? In the first three videos, Shadow of R'hllor, Fire Others, and Fire Wights, we basically picked up the Red Temple, turned it upside down, and shook out all of its secrets. And I was attempting to make a final video to cover all the delightful and wicked things Melisandre might do with all this magic at the wall. However, one specific thing that I think she's going to do, create a Night's Watch company of Fire Wights to fight alongside Jon Snow, who will also be a Fire Wight, seemed like it would make a nice, compact theory video on its own. And so here we are with Melisandre's Secrets 4, Fire Wight's Watch. Then in part 5, Chosen of R'hllor, we'll focus specifically on Jon and Melisandre, covering everything from the ins and outs of Jon's impending resurrection, to Mel's desire to make more shadow babies, definitely one with Jon, and also the idea of Melisandre perhaps completing her transformation into a being of pure fire magic, which is what I'm referring to as a Fire Other. If you haven't watched the first three videos, I do recommend you check those out first, especially the Fire Wights video. Although this video will mostly make sense, even if you haven't. Go ahead and do me a solid and click that like button. Make sure your subscription bell is set to all, because again, YouTube changes it on you. And thanks in advance for leaving me a comment about who you think will join Jon Snow's Fire Wight's Watch. If you'd like to support my YouTube channel and keep me making videos, then you can check out the links below to our Patreon campaign, our PayPal if you prefer a one-time donation, or you can even become a channel member now with the join button right next to the subscribe button. Now let me tell you all about the new and more zombified company of fiery Night's Watch Rangers that Melisandre will soon be creating. As I was saying, this entire series has been essentially leading up to one big question. What might Melisandre of Ahai, Priestess of R'hllor and Shadowbinder, do at the wall with all this potential sorcery at her elegant fingertips? We've talked about a lot of things: shadow babies and resurrection kisses, total fire transformation, and more. So again, the question is, where is all this headed? First off, Melisandre is definitely thinking about making more and better shadow babies. And this quote is from Melisandre's lone POV chapter in A Dance with Dragons. The carved chest that she had brought across the narrow sea was more than 3/4 empty now, and while Melisandre had the knowledge to make more powders, she lacked many rare ingredients. My spells should suffice. She was stronger at the wall, stronger even than in Ahai. Her every word and gesture was more potent, and she could do things that she had never done before. Such shadows as I bring forth here will be terrible, and no creature of the dark will stand before them. With such sorceries at her command, she should soon have no more need of the feeble tricks of alchemists and pyromancers. Ooh, boys, there's a lot going on here. Ahai and the wall are both magical places, hinges of the world, which seem to amplify magical spells in their vicinity. Melisandre is basically salivating at this thought, imagining both more and terrible shadow babies and things she had never done before. I wonder what that means. Perhaps raising the dead, or some new form of shadow binding that we haven't seen yet. Or perhaps that's the same thing, since the R'hllorist resurrection, known as the Last Kiss, seems to be an act of shadow binding, literally binding the shadow of the deceased to their reanimated corpse, as we discussed in the Fire Wights video, of course. Consider also that Jon Snow is going to need something of an unprecedented resurrection, or at least something that hasn't been done in thousands of years. It's going to be far more complex than Berric's, because Jon is a skin changer. We know from the Varemir's Six Skins, A Dance with Dragons prologue, that the spirit of a skin changer goes into that of his bonded animal, or her bonded animal, upon their death. So Jon will need both a resurrection of his corpse and possibly a bit of help getting out of his wolf. And on top of that, the others could even try to steal his body, as I talked about in the Lord Snow and Promised to the Others videos. Or perhaps Melisandre's things she had never done before refers to her ongoing transformation into what I'm calling a Fire Other. It does seem that each use of R'hllor's magic, fire magic that is, furthers this transformation and burns out a little more of Melisandre's humanity. So with the wall amplifying her magic, and with the need for tremendous sorcery close at hand, it seems very possible or even likely that Melisandre will complete this transformation and thereby be able to perform new magics. We should also note that Melisandre is essentially proposing to sex magic humanity's way out of War for the Dawn 2.0 when she talks about bringing forth shadows that no creature of the dark will stand before. And yes, that's why I wore my Red Hot Chili Peppers Blood Sugar Sex Magic t-shirt. We have to ask, just how many shadow babies is Melisandre planning to make to defeat the others? How many Night's Watchmen must give of their life fires in brave service to spawn this shadow army chosen by R'hllor, perhaps not as bad as it looked at first? Well, here's where all of our research into shadow binding and R'hllorist resurrection comes into play. Because we now understand that both shadow baby creation and the last kiss resurrection magic can be thought of as shadow binding, and that wights of all kinds can be considered shadows, we can understand that Melisandre isn't necessarily talking about performing sex magic with all the Night's Watchmen, which would be a little over the top from a "George, why did you write this?" perspective. The idea of a Night's Watch full of shadow-bound fire wights, however, well, that makes a damn lot of sense, as we discussed at the end of the Fire Wights video. Berric has shown us that fire wights carry the power of fire magic in their burnt, blackened blood, and can therefore use that blood to light their own swords on fire, just like we saw on the TV show. And wouldn't that be useful in the fight against the others and the wights, as it was on the TV show? Because of George R.R. Martin's consistent use of archetypes, we know that anyone wielding a burning sword in this story qualifies as some kind of Azor Ahai parallel figure. And since Berric not only wields a flaming sword, but is now a fire wight, he's actually a literal warrior of fire, just as Azor Ahai is called the warrior of fire and the champion of R'hllor, who is fire. So there definitely seems to be a message here about Azor Ahai being connected to fire wight magic. Accordingly, we've seen that the priests of R'hllor believe that death itself will bend its knee to Azor Ahai reborn, and that all those who die fighting in his cause will themselves be reborn. Perhaps this is just metaphysical, spiritual salvation talk? But perhaps the original Azor Ahai fought the battles of the Long Night with an army of fire wights, who, again, can light their own swords on fire at will. Jon Snow is an even more important echo of Azor Ahai, of course, and George has called Berric's fire wight status foreshadowing for Jon Snow's eventual resurrection. So with Melisandre hovering over Jon like a hungry cougar who can't get his long face out of her flame visions, #facts, there can be little doubt that Jon will likely end up a fire wight of some kind, and like Berric, he'll be able to light his own sword on fire. And that, by the way, means there's really no reason for Jon to stab Daenerys in the chest to make a flaming Lightbringer sword. That's right, good news. You can absolutely bury that terrible theory in the ground. Even better, when Jon does light his own sword on fire with his own fire-magicked blood, he'll be using Valyrian steel, which, of course, should be able to withstand R'hllor's holy flames much better than Berric's common steel. Fire-whited Jon will be the ideal candidate to face the others, likely alongside Daenerys and her dragons. And he'll be revealed as a fulfillment of the Azor Ahai reborn prophecy, again, along with Daenerys. So, will Jon be the only fire wight, or might he have some sort of undead fellowship to keep him company? Azor Ahai did not win his war alone, as Melisandre says, and Jon probably can't slay all those others by himself, right? Will those that die fighting alongside Jon Snow be reborn as fire wights? I sure hope so, because that's the premise of this video. And if we take a look at Jon's Azor Ahai dream from A Dance with Dragons, we can see some pretty strong foreshadowing for just such a thing. I've quoted this passage many times. It's pretty important. It's Jon's Azor Ahai dream. But let's take a look at it one more time. "Stand fast," Jon Snow called. "Throw them back." He stood atop the wall, alone. "Flame," he cried. "Feed them flame." But there was no one to pay heed. "They are all gone. They have abandoned me." Burning shafts hissed upward, trailing tongues of fire. Scarecrow brothers tumbled down, black cloaks ablaze. Snow and eagle cried as foemen scuttled up the ice like spiders. John was armored in black ice, but his blade burned red in his fist. As the dead men reached the top of the wall, he sent them down to die again. He slew a graybeard and a beardless boy, a giant, a gaunt man with filed teeth, a girl with thick red hair. Too late, he recognized Ygritte. She was gone as quick as she'd appeared. First off, this is very clear Azor Ahai symbolism. Not only the red burning sword and the fight against the forces of darkness, but the part about his slaying Ygritte with that sword. That's a pretty clear echo of Azor Ahai slaying his wife, Nissa. John never did any such thing in real life, of course. He's dreaming about killing Ygritte because he feels responsible for her death and guilty for betraying her, so to speak. But this detail also serves to help the reader identify Jon's archetypal role here. He's an Azor Ahai figure, defending the wall against undead foes that scuttle up the ice like spiders. We also see a pretty nice ice and fire harmony here with Jon's burning sword and black ice armor, as befits a man who has the blood of the dragon in his veins, assuming R+L=J is true, as well as the blood of the other in his veins, if my theory about the Starks having the blood of the others is true. And that's not just my theory, of course. A lot of people have come to that conclusion. The thing to key in on here is the line about Scarecrow brothers tumbled down, black cloaks ablaze. Jon is manning the wall alone in this stream, thinking about how everyone has abandoned him, save for the scarecrow sentinels that the Watch erected to make it look like there were more Watchmen than there really were in the fight against the wildlings at Castle Black. In Jon's dream, these scarecrow sentinels, as the brothers call them, have caught on fire. So could this be a clue about Jon eventually fighting the others with fire-whited Night's Watchmen? Following the lead of Pip, the Black brothers even take to naming the Scarecrow Sentinels after their fallen comrades. It makes it seem as if there's more of us, Pip says. So they really are like dead Watchmen brought back to life to defend the wall. And now in Jon's Azor Ahai last battle dream, set on fire. Here's the thing, though. Interpreting the burning scarecrow sentinels, named after dead watchmen as fire-white foreshadowing, isn't just an intuitive leap, or just a great leap in general. The very first fire-white we see in the story is referred to as a scarecrow, and like the scarecrow sentinels and all Night's Watch brothers, he's wearing a black cloak.
When we left King's Landing, we were men of Winterfell, and men of Derry, and men of Blackhaven, Mallory men and wild men. We were knights and squires, and men-at-arms, lords and commoners, bound together by only our purpose.
The voice came from the man seated amongst the weirwood roots halfway up the wall.
60 of us set out to bring the king's justice to your brother.
The speaker was descending the tangle of steps toward the floor.
60 brave men and true, led by a fool in a starry cloak.
A scarecrow of a man, he wore a ragged black cloak speckled with stars, and an iron breastplate dinted by 100 battles. A thicket of red gold hair hid most of his face, save for a bald spot above his left ear, where his head had been smashed in.
More than 80 of our company are dead now, but others have taken up the swords that fell from their hands.
When he reached the floor, the outlaws moved aside to let him pass. One of his eyes was gone, Arya saw, the flesh about the socket scarred and puckered, and he had a dark black ring all around his neck.
With their help, we fight on as best we can, for Robert and the realm.
Robert, rasped Sandor Clegane, incredulous.
The king is dead,
the Scarecrow Knight admitted.
But we are the king's men, though the royal banner we bore was lost at the Mummer's Ford when your brother's butchers fell upon us.
He touched his breast with a fist.
Robert is slain, but his realm remains, and we defend her.
All right, as I like to say, there's a lot going on here, so let's start with the basic comparison between Berric's lore-powered self and the burning Scarecrow Sentinels, which is set up by the use of the word scarecrow to describe Berric, both here and elsewhere, and by the fact that Berric is wearing a black cloak. though Berric's has fancy lightning bolts, which we all know would be completely in violation of the dress code at the wall. Just ask Mance Rayder. Berric is also a member of a brotherhood which defends the realm. It's called the Brotherhood Without Banners and the Forgotten Fellowship. Obviously, the Black Brothers of the Night's Watch are a brotherhood too, and very much forgotten up at the wall. And though they have banners, those banners are black and empty, and the men who join the Watch leave their old banners and shields behind. Then we have the wordplay in lines like, "More than 80 of our company are dead now," implying Berric's company as a company of dead men. Or, "The king is dead, but we are the king's men," which kind of makes it sound like this company of dead men serve a dead king. That's a reference to Robert, but they also serve a dead person, Berric. A fire wight with a burning sword, protecting the realm with a ragtag company of forgotten dead men. You can see how this could be foreshadowing for Jon fighting to save the realm with a group of undead Night's Watchmen. Jon would also be a dead king, like Robert, since he appears to have some claim to the titles of King of Winter and King of the Seven Kingdoms. All right, so hopefully I've painted a good picture of the basic symbolism at work here. Berric's fire-white nature is a foreshadowing for Jon Snow, and Berric is implied as defending the realm with a company of dead men. Berric is combining the symbolism of Azor Ahai with the symbolism of the burning scarecrow Night's Watchman in Jon's dream, a dream where Jon, in turn, is doing his own Azor Ahai impression by defending the wall with a burning red sword. So when we see those burning scarecrow brothers defending the wall with Azor Ahai Jon, I think we should imagine a line of fire sword-wielding fire wights, a battalion of Berrics. Hell, the name Berric could even be a word pun on barracks, as in the name of a building where soldiers live. The chosen soldiers of Lore live in fiery barracks/barracks. And that's actually not a joke. The barracks at Castle Black are in fact called the Flint Barracks. Flints are things to start fires with, and oh gosh, are those scarecrow sentinels atop the Flint Barracks? Across the yard, one of the bowmen on the roof of the old Flint Barracks had unlaced his breeches and was pissing through a krenel. Molley, he knew from the man's greasy orange hair. Men in black cloaks were visible on other roofs and tower tops as well, though 9 of every 10 happened to be made of straw. The Scarecrow Sentinels, Donald Noy called them. You'll have to excuse Molley's crudeness there, as there's just no time to run to the privy when you're getting ready to fight the wildlings. In any case, this quote does indeed place Scarecrow Sentinels atop the Flint Barracks, which makes sense. Fiery soldiers should live in Flint Barracks, right? This scene is both the introduction of the Scarecrow Sentinels as well as the first time the barracks have been called the Flint Barracks. So this definitely seems like a name that Martin came up with specifically to enhance the imagery of the Scarecrow Watchman. Then we have the red-headed Molley, who also seems to be placed here to complement the idea of the burning scarecrows. He's kissed by fire, see? R'hllor's fiery kiss is, after all, how you make a fiery scarecrow brother. Beric Dondarrion's hair is kissed by fire too. It's actually described as red gold in the quote we read earlier, which, by the way, compares well to Stannis' Azor Ahai crown of red gold metal flames. Molley's hair is sometimes called orange and sometimes red, as those are both ways of describing the same color hair. But what's better is that Molley's fiery, ruddy hair is almost always described as greasy, as it is here, which kind of just makes him sound like a greasy, flaming torch. Going further, because that's what we do here, and because George has said that he places a lot of weight on the names of characters, and in fact seems to design his complementary characters like Molley exclusively to complement the symbolism of a given scene. We might note that the name Molley is given to a red-headed person because mulled wine, a form of heated, spiced wine, is red and warm. Of course, wine is a very common symbol for blood in both the real world and in A Song of Ice and Fire. So, in the context of Molley's kissed by fire hair and the Scarecrow Sentinels atop the Flint Barracks, the name Molley seems meant to imply the idea of blood that has been heated or cooked, spiced by R'hllor, if you will. And I also noticed that on Berric's first death, it is said that Thoros drew a foot of lance from his chest that night and poured boiling wine into the hole it left. In other words, the boiling wine that Thoros poured into Berric's chest right before he resurrected him is simply a complementary symbol to the R'hllorist fire that he breathed down into Berric's chest, with both of those things expressing the idea that Berric's blood is now powered by R'hllor, or cooked by R'hllor, we might say. So just to sum up and cram all that into one sentence, Molley is a kissed by fire, greasy torch of a night's watchman, with symbolically cooked blood hanging out with highly flammable scarecrow brothers atop the flint barracks. And that, my friends, is a pretty great clue about night's watchmen who receive the fiery resurrection kiss of R'hllor. One final note on this scene, which again is the introduction of the Scarecrow Sentinels. They are the brainchild of Maester Aemon. Aemon Targaryen, that is, which means that a dragon person created the Scarecrow Brothers, just as the original Azor Ahai may have created his own army of fire wights, his very own battalion of barracks. In any case, what's this? Ravenous Reader has another find relating to burning barracks? Well, okay, I guess this video script isn't too long. I guess we have another 5 minutes to see what Ravi found, especially since it stars Timett, Son of Timett. All right, guys, we're about to do a little bit of a side branch and a deep dive, so hold on to your butts. This may seem a little in the weeds at first, but this is how George Martin weaves his masterpiece of symbolism and archetypal parallels. And check out the George R.R. Martin Master of Archetypes livestream that we just did recently for more on archetypes and George's use of them. So as you all surely remember, there's a mountain clan in the Vale of Arryn, in the Mountains of the Moon, who are called the Burned Men. The Burned Men are led by Timett, Son of Timett, who seems to be borrowing Berric's symbolism. He has red kissed by fire hair and one burned out eye, just like Berric. Timett put out his own eye with a white-hot knife to prove his manliness, essentially, while Berric's eye was put out with a knife by the mountain. Timett lost his eye in the mountains, Berric lost his eye to the mountain. Now, this is a pretty interesting parallel, right? Seems like we could have another potential echo of the pattern, with Timett borrowing Berric's symbolism and then leading a company of burned men. Problem is, the burned men are basically wildlings and they live in the mountains, so they probably don't stay in any barracks. Until they come to King's Landing, that is. Then we read that Tyrion found Timett dicing with his burned men in the barracks. Burned men in the barracks? Well, it's funny because there totally is a burned man inside Berric Dondarrion. And why is Timett dicing them? Is he up to some sort of Dr. Frankenstein business here? The next line is Tyrion telling Timett to come to my solar at midnight. A solar midnight is a great description of the long night, if I do say so myself. And that's just when we'll need R'hllor's army of flame and shadow to come pouring out of their barracks. So that's pretty good stuff. A character with clear parallels to Berric, living with burned men in the barracks. Timett's symbolism actually goes a bit further, though, with clear ties not only to Berric, but to Jon Snow and even Bloodraven, who are two dragon men who led the Night's Watch. Just as the last hero, if he has some sort of connection to Azor Ahai, would be a dragon man leading the first Night's Watch. This will also be a great way to emphasize the importance of the intersection between fire magic and weirwood magic, which I began talking about in the Fire Wights video. The key idea being that Azor Ahai and his fire magic would have come to Westeros during the Long Night and figured into the creation of the Night's Watch and the battle against the others. So, Timett, Son of Timett. He's a war chief of the Burned Men, and therefore known as a Red Hand. The Red Hand is actually a very important symbol inside of A Song of Ice and Fire, as it refers to both fiery hands, which means R'hlorism, and bloody hands, which means the weirwoods. The fiery hand is an important R'hllor symbol based on the soldiers of R'hllor being called the Fiery Hand, and based on the actual fiery hand that Moqorro gave Victarion, while the bloody hands are how the red five-pointed leaves of the weirwood are basically always described. And that's why I got my LRG red-handed smoking tree man here. As I just mentioned, the idea of Azor Ahai, or the last hero, who may be the same person or closely related people, fighting with a Night's Watch battalion of fire wights is very much a merging of R'hllorism and weirwood magic. Here's what I mean. The first Night's Watch were said to have been organized by the children of the forest, and would have been armed by the children with dragonglass weapons, as the original Night's Watchmen were for centuries. And I also strongly suspect that the last hero and some of his companions may have been skin changers. I think that's why the last hero has a dog, if you will. But then, of course, if any of them had flaming swords or were made into fire wights, then that would have required wielders of fire magic, which would be where Azor Ahai and his mages would come in. One even imagines that the dragonglass knives that the children of the forest gave them may have been the weapons that such fire wights would have lit on fire with their magical blood. Doesn't have quite the reach, but it'll still do the job. And perhaps this is the explanation for the belief that dragonglass candles must be lit by cutting your hand upon it. So anyway, we see this weirwood fire magic duality with all the parallel characters that we've just been discussing, including Timmet. Calling Timmet a red hand is like calling him a weirwood leaf, but he's a burned man of a weirwood leaf with a burned eye. Berric and Bloodraven, of course, live in weirwood caves and sit amongst weirwood roots, with Bloodraven being an actual green seer. But of course, Berric is a burning man, powered by R'hllor, and Bloodraven has the hot blood of the dragon in his veins, with his red eye also burning like the last coal in a dying fire. Jon Snow is the most important character in this grouping, and he prays to the weirwoods, said his Night's Watch oath to the weirwoods, and walks beside his weirwood-colored wolf, which has now, upon his death, become a kind of weirwood cave home for his dead spirit. But of course, Jon is also a secret Blood of the Dragon person, and a future Firewhite commander of the Watch. Jon also has a burned hand, which he got fighting against the ice-whited Night's Watch ranger Othor in Mormont's chamber. So, given that the soldiers of R'hllor are the fiery hand, this seems like an obvious way to indicate that Jon will become a soldier of R'hllor, meaning a firewight, and perhaps a leader of other firewight soldiers, in a confrontation with the others and their ice wights. Jon's valor against the Wight in Mormont's chamber is also the reason why Jon was given his Valyrian steel sword. And indeed, Jon's burned hand will probably hold a burning longclaw, as he becomes an instrument of both fire magic and the old gods. Timett Son of Timett, well, he's definitely a symbolic instrument of the old gods as well, because the name Timothy is comprised of the Greek words for honor and God. Jon Snow's version of the one-eye symbolism that we see in Berric, Bloodraven, and Timett Son of Timett comes in the form of the long eagle claw wound that Jon took across one of his eyes when he was attacked by Orell's eagle. Jon even describes the wound as burning, just as Timett literally burned out his own eye with a white-hot knife, and just as Berric's remaining eye burns with R'hllor's fire. And just as Bloodraven's one red eye burns like the last coal in a dying fire. In other words, you should be able to see with your own eyes, however many you have, that Timett Son of Timett fits into this fiery leader of a firewhite army family of symbolism very tightly. Then the cherry on top of the Timett burned man symbolism is the likely fact that the burned men were created by a dragon, just as Aemon created the scarecrow sentinels, and just as Azor Ahai or his mages would have created his fire-white army. This next quote is from The World of Ice and Fire.
Amongst the burned men, a youth must give some part of his body to the fire to prove his courage before he can be deemed a man. This practice might have originated in the years after the Dance of the Dragons, some maesters believe, when an offshoot of the Painted Dogs were said to have worshipped a fire witch in the mountains, sending their boys to bring her gifts and risk the flames of the dragon she commanded to prove their manhood.
All right, so that's quite the hazing ritual, isn't it? Then in Fire and Blood, we learn that that dragon is probably Sheepstealer, and the fire witch Nettles, Sheepstealer's rider. And similarly, it says that youths of the burned men were only accounted men when they returned with burns to show that they had faced the dragon woman in her lair. This is pretty righteous foreshadowing, and kind of the reason I went all this way down the Timett Son of Timett rabbit hole. The burned men were created by a dragon and a fire witch, just as Jon is a dragon, and Melisandre the fire witch that will create his fire-white army. Continuing that same parallel, we see that Berric has Thoros for his fire witch, as well as Lady Stoneheart and even the ghost of Highheart. So at this point, we should probably imagine that the last hero had some kind of fire magic priestess at his side. Or perhaps Azor Ahai's fire priestess, quote-unquote, was Nissa, who according to legend gave her fire and life to create his burning Lightbringer sword. What if, instead of a mere mortal, Nissa was already a magical woman like Melisandre, and perhaps she didn't die when stabbed with Lightbringer, but instead finished a transformation into a fire other or fire wight? I'm kind of just spitballing here, but the bottom line is that for fire wights to exist, we need a fire magic priest or priestess. So let's raise a toast to Timett Son of Timett, whose symbolism is simply... Oh, what's this? Timett Son of Timett killed the wine seller's son when he tried to cheat him at cards? Really? Pinned his hand to the table with a knife and ripped out his throat? Jesus. Well, I guess we won't toast him with wine then. Maybe we'll just move along. Those of you who have been watching my channel for a long while now, and thank you guys, know that I have a more elaborate theory about the last hero and his first group of Watchmen being undead Watchmen, which is known as Green Zombies theory. The core idea is that when we hear of the last hero's 12 companions dying, and then later the last hero emerging to lead the, quote, first men of the Night's Watch against the others in the War for the Dawn, we should think about his dead friends coming back to life and becoming those first Watchmen. They may have been conscious ice wights like Cold Hands, or fire wights like Berric. But the clues about the first Watchmen being zombies are abundant. Besides the precedent of Cold Hands as a zombie Watchman and the fact that Jon is about to become a zombie Watchman, as well as all this scarecrow sentinel fire wight stuff, we have lines like this gem from Dolorous Ed. We ride at first light, did you hear? Sun or snow, the old bear tells. Sam glanced anxiously at the sky. Snow? He squeaked. We ride? All of us? Well, no, some will need to walk. He shook himself. Tywin now, he says we need to learn to ride dead horses, like the others do. He claims it would save on feed. How much could a dead horse eat? Ed laced himself back up. Can't say I fancy the notion. Once they figure a way to work a dead horse, we'll be next. Likely I'll be the first to... Ed, they'll say, dying's no excuse for lying down no more. So get on up and take this spear, you've got the watch tonight. Well, I shouldn't be so gloomy. Might be I'll die before they work it out. Might be we'll all die, and sooner than we'd like, Sam thought, as he climbed awkwardly to his feet. So as the brave Watchmen prepare to ride forth into the haunted forest, come sun or snow, Ed suddenly catches a vision of undead Night's Watchmen riding undead horses. Along the same lines, when Lord Commander Mormont ponders the skull in the mouth of the weirwood tree at Wight Tree, and wishes it could talk to him and reveal its secrets. Dolorous Ed pipes up, Bad enough when the dead come walking, now the old bear wants them talking as well. No good will come of that, I'll warrant. Ed is afraid of Lord Commanders that talk to the dead, as they're the type to make you man the watch even after you die. Dolorous Ed is definitely a droll fellow, but George is hiding important clues about the true nature of the Night's Watch in his jokes here. I hope you can see that. Rest assured that this commentary is not about the macroeconomic efficiencies of not having to feed undead horses, but about the usefulness of not having to feed undead watchmen who range the haunted forest in the lands of always winter, where food is scarce. Undead Night's Watch brothers, whether made by ice or fire, are basically ideally suited to range into the frozen lands beyond the wall, because they don't need to eat, or sleep, or seek shelter. Cold Hands is untouched by the cold of the north, and it seems reasonable that fire wights, being powered by R'hllor, could potentially also withstand the cold. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the point of making Jon into a fire wight would be, since he's clearly got to go north and battle the others. For all these reasons, conscious wights really are the perfect rangers, and if they can light their swords on fire, well, all the better. Thus, the Relorist idea that Azor Ahai is someone who can raise the dead might line up very well with the idea of undead Night's Watch brothers fighting alongside the last hero and his blade of dragon steel in the first War for the Dawn. I actually came up with those two theories independently, but they ended up at the same place, which is that you need wights to fight the others. I believe this ancient truth is also the reason why the Night's Watch brothers are said to have black blood. Ostensibly, it's just a remark on their allegiance to the Watch, much like a sports fan would say they bleed the color of their favorite team to indicate their loyalty. However, both fire wights like Berric and ice wights like Cold Hands have black blood, so if the original Night's Watch were zombies, they'd actually have black blood. The same goes for the wildling belief that red hair is kissed by fire and therefore lucky. This may be another memory of the War for the Dawn, when only the chosen soldiers of R'hllor who have received the fiery last kiss resurrection were able to stand against the others. That's what I call lucky. Similarly, the Black Brothers are frequently and repeatedly described as shadows and shadows in black. And of course, our research shows that creating a fire wight basically amounts to shadow binding the spirit of the deceased back to their reanimated corpse. The Night's Watch is also undead on a thematic level because taking the black is often something people do instead of accepting a death sentence. And it's also a form of permanent exile away from the green lands and your former life. Just as Cold Hands is exiled beyond the wall, essentially. The wearing of all black clothing, as the Black Brothers do, is usually regarded as wearing mourning clothes in the wake of someone's passing. So the Black Brothers are basically attending a permanent funeral at the wall. I think there's even a clever pun happening here. The Night's Watch speak of themselves as the light that brings the dawn and the swords in the darkness. And they wear black mourning clothes. So maybe they're the swords of mourning. And shout out to the black dragon sword Mournblade from the Elric of Melniboné universe. Finally, there are abundant lines about the Black Brothers moving about the castles on the wall like ghosts, or about those castles being homes for ghosts, and so on. All of which you can find in the first 3 videos of the Green Zombies series. So to sum up, the black-blooded brothers of the Night's Watch are already thematically and symbolically dead, and Jon's dream seems to depict him defending the wall with a burning sword and an army of burning scarecrow knights like Berric. For anything along those lines to happen, we'll need someone capable of performing several R'hllorist resurrections at the wall, and oh, hello Melisandre, I didn't see you standing there, melting the snow. Such shadows as I bring forth here will be terrible, and no creature of the dark will stand before them. The Black Brothers are already referred to shadows anyway, and when some of the dead ones have been shadow-bound and made into fire wights, burning scarecrow brothers for true, we may finally have a fighting force that the others truly cannot stand against. They'll be led by Jon Snow, burning sword in burned hand, and all of these scarecrow brothers should have the same ability to light their swords on fire that Berric has and that Jon will have. Thus, we see that one of Melisandre's most important secrets will turn out to be the knowledge and ability to recreate the fire-white shadow army of the first Azor Ahai. And that's not bad. Well, it's a touch horrific, but it's pretty potent magic. So as I said, Mel is a bit of a cougar, but she probably isn't planning to sex magic her way to defeating the others. She is, however, most definitely thinking about doing some sex magic with Jon, so be sure to tune in next time for Part 5, Chosen of R'hllor, where things are set to get truly freaky. And don't forget to leave a comment on the way out and let me know who you think might join Jon's fire-white army. Berric himself is already dead in the books, of course. Dolorous said would make a lot of sense. Perhaps Tormund, perhaps some of the other Night's Watch brothers, perhaps Pip or Gren, or Molley himself. Maybe we can pull the Hound off of the Quiet Isle. Maybe Jaime or Brienne will take the Flame of Life from Lady Stoneheart and take Oathkeeper and make their way up to the wall. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you real soon with Part 5, Chosen of R'hllor.